Welcome to this collection of sci-fi short stories by James Causey. I'll be narrating Inhibition, Competition, Exploiter's End, and Teething Ring. Thanks to all the supporters of the Stories from the Sky SFF project, both here on YouTube and on Substack. If you haven't subscribed yet and find yourself enjoying the stories, I urge you to do so. Substack subscribers get exclusive short stories every Monday and ad-free audio and video versions of all the stories I narrate. Link in the description if you're interested. But for now, let's get to the stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Inhibition by James Causey. Narrated by William Sky. Regardless of scientific attainment, any culture is vulnerable to inhibition, and Saxon was a good agent. No culture nor individual would sway his loyal appraisal. Planetfall. Here the forest was green and cool. A soft, damp wind promised rain. The colonists moved down the ramp, staring at the crew members piling crates of supplies in the meadow beyond. Frowns. Then whispers. Saxon glanced up. His nostrils flared. "Hurry," he told the crewman, and came forward, beaming. He was tired. It showed in his feverish, too-bright smile as he said, "Afraid engineering's a little behind schedule. They'll be here tomorrow morning to erect your city. Tonight you'll have to rough it." Reactions varied. The women murmured and moved closer to their men. Some smiled. One man thoughtfully eyed the mounting pyramid of supplies. "You're getting a choice world, Jarl," Saxon said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Survey spent 30 years here balancing the ecology, wiping out the bugs and carnivores. Eden." Saxon tasted the word like wine. Jarl Madsen's face was stone. "Aren't they all named Eden?" From the forest came a chittering bark like anthropomorphic laughter. Saxon shivered, remembering the thing that chittered, the 3-inch fangs and the talons. "Hardly," he lied. "That, incidentally, was a gnarl. Herbivore, very harmless." Madsen walked past him towards the supplies. Saxon moved among the colonists, shaking hands, congratulating, speaking of green fields and good crops and a virgin planet where every man could carve an empire. These last moments were the worst, when you said goodbye knowing that 30% of them would be dead within the week. He saw Madsen opening a supply case. Damn him, just 3 more minutes. The last crew member dumped his load and hurried into the airlock. Saxon started casually after him, too late. Madsen stood there, his grin taut, nailed on. "Primitive prefab shelters," he said thickly. "Axes and seeds. The city was a lie. We're on our own, is that it? Why—" Saxon's palm flashed and Madsen fell, writhing. There were shouts, hands clawing at him as he tore free, sprinting for the ship. "Always running," he thought bitterly. "I'm getting old." He walked through the silent corridors of the ship, a lonely figure in the black uniform of the Inhibition Corps, and once he stared through the porthole at Eden 21, a mottled sphere receding into the star-frosted night. His mouth twisted. Conceive a colony in fear, breed it in terror. Watch it adapt, grow. If it grows too fast, hurt it. Hurt it with disease, famine, dictatorship. If it keeps growing, destroy it. The captain came down the corridor and stood at respectful attention before the black uniform. "Stereo call, Commander. Prime base." Saxon slowly went to his cabin. The stereo panel was flashing steady crimson to designate top priority, and he restrained a savage impulse to shut the thing off. He slumped in the control chair and the tri-die image of a man at a desk slowly coalesced. It was a granite-featured old man with eyes like blue ice, and Saxon's head snapped sharply erect. It was Primus Gant, Corps Director. At 90 parsecs, Gant's features were slightly hazed, but his voice was clear, sharp as a sword. "Report, Commander." "My extrapolation went through an hour ago. Also my resignation." Nothing moved in Gant's face or his eyes. Saxon said stiffly, "Planetfall uneventful. Area inimical. Initial shock conception, probable god betrayal mythology by 4th generation. Those things in the forest should get 30% of them the first week. Weaponless they'll run. The 2-to-1 female ratio should make for an agricultural matriarchy by the 6th generation. Recommend intermittent check at that time." He took a slow, angry breath. "Why didn't we give them weapons?" Gant's smile was acid. "Because we haven't yet tried an agricultural matriarchy, Commander. Because the lower the initial survival factor, the slower the culture development. Getting squeamish?" Saxon said doggedly. "They didn't have a chance." "Neither did 20 million people on Earth in the last atomic war." The director's voice was soft. "All colonists volunteer. Some have a vision. Others have a latent power drive that stasis can't satisfy. They're misfits regardless, potential threats to stasis. Remember your last leave, Commander? I believe you met my son." Saxon nodded curtly. He remembered the director's son as a quiet, soft-spoken youth with the yearning for far places in his eyes. "I had hoped he would qualify for the Corps." Gant looked suddenly old, tired. "Instead, he's volunteering for colonial service. Did you ever lose a son, Commander?" They stared at each other across the humming emptiness, and Saxon finally whispered, "I'm sorry." "Stasis is all we can afford," the director said numbly. "Man can't have utopia yet, because he's still man. Perhaps he'll never have it, but by God he'll try. Resignation withdrawn?" Saxon nodded. He could not speak. "I'm glad. The ship's captain had orders to burn you down had you refused." Gant's face was wooden. "Inhibition agents never quit. They just die in harness. You'll take the lifeboat to Eden 11 for 6th generation check. Good hunting, Commander." The image faded. Saxon sat for a long time staring into the darkness. Eden 11 was 3 parsecs distant near Algol. For the next 10 hours, Saxon paced the marvellously equipped lifeboat and absorbed data from the robot recorder. He stared at the hard crystal ache of the stars and thought of the director's son. He thought about the shining cities of Earth and about stasis. Stasis meant control. It meant control of 1 billion people, a rigid planetary economy. It meant the assassination branch of the Corps. Assassination, carefully contrived to appear accidental, took care of those few malcontents who were either too smart or too stupid to sign up for colonization. It meant a gradual weeding out of the unsane, the power-mad. It meant learning the true meaning of sanity and peace and racial brotherhood. And it meant the stagnation of science, a thick film of dust gathering on the textbooks of the military tactician and warships rotting at anchor. It meant the white spire of the Stasis Administration Center at New Washington and the words graven over the golden portals, "Know thyself, man, or die." Was the dream worth it? Or was man doomed to die like a brawling ape playing with lightning? Saxon could not answer. Meanwhile, the colonies had to be inhibited. One interplanetary war could smash the fragile structure so painstakingly built over the last few hundred years. This was the turning point, the final crossroads of man's destiny. Saxon smiled bleakly. Ultimately, there would be a colony they could neither inhibit or destroy. The adaptive ultimate. That colony would be man no longer, but Homo superior. But by then it wouldn't matter. The lifeboat came in on the night side of Eden 11 and hung above the blue mountains like a basking shark. Saxon checked his coordinates. This had been the original landing site almost 200 years ago. He switched the infraview on maximum and began to cruise in widening spirals. These 6th-generation hops were usually routine. If nomadic, a few political shifts could help warp the culture into a set pattern. A simple matter to play the visiting deity, pick one warped psychotic and invest him with power. A dictatorship was by far the best way of inhibiting a young culture. Agricultural city-states were almost as easy. Designate a particular crop as sacred, kill the rotation program, impoverish the land, introduce serfdom. By dawn, Saxon found what he was looking for. A row of cleared fields and a farmhouse. He reconnoitred 100 miles farther and frowned. There was no clump of dwellings, no sign of a village trading community. He brought the ship down in a forest 3 miles away from the farmhouse and camouflaged it to look like a great mossy boulder. He spent the entire morning testing the atmosphere and the soil with a savage patience. In the early years of the Corps, virus mutations had taken a fearful toll of intermittent spotters. Finally, he discarded his uniform and selected a pair of homespuns from the ship's wardrobe locker. Under the homespuns reposed his utility kit, a miniature arsenal. Late that afternoon he emerged from the forest and stood at the edge of the cleared fields, a weather-beaten itinerant obviously willing to chop wood for a meal. Abruptly his jaw muscle twitched. The scene was pastoral, perfect. The man ploughing the South 40, the little girl playing in the shadow of the sleepy farmhouse. But no beast pulled that plough. A giant of a man with power and intelligence stamped on his bronze features pushed the plough by hand in a die-straight furrow. The little girl was blonde and elfin. She wore sandals, her tunic was brief and plain. She was playing Follow the Leader with a robot. The robot was tall. The sun struck sparks from its steel carapace as it lumbered after the girl. Saxon stood frozen as she came flying towards him in a burst of tossing blonde hair and laughter as she saw him and came to a dead halt. "Hello," Saxon said. He tried to smile. "Hello." Her inflection was slurred. After 6 generations, naturally. Her blue eyes sparkled. "Footsore, stranger?" The words had the cadence of a ritual greeting. Saxon stared at the robot and said carefully, "Yes." "He's only a primer model," she said, following his gaze. "Next year, when I'm 12, Father promised to install secondary circuits. My name's Vina. What's yours?" Saxon introduced himself as the giant at the plough came forward. His white smile was a benediction, his voice a lambent organ. "Welcome, Rover. Haven't seen one of you in months. I'm Lang, agricultural hobbyist. You'll stay?" His tone was almost pleading. Saxon nodded inarticulately, followed them towards the farmhouse. His hands were shaking. The interior of the house was dimensionless. For a moment Saxon thought he was still outside. A silver brook tinkled through the mossy carpet that was the floor. The south wall was a golden vista of ripe wheat rippling in the warm breeze that ruffled his hair. Birds twittered in the sun-flecked foliage overhead. "Nice house," Saxon said numbly. Lang's smile was different. "A bit pretentious, I'm afraid. Grandfather built it right after the landing. We've been too lazy to do much remodeling. A remarkable man, Grandfather." That explained it, Saxon thought in relief. One titan in an infant colony, warping it into a utopian mould, passing on the heritage of his genius. How long, he wondered coldly, before they built starships and returned to demolish the Earth which had exiled them? "It must be wonderful to be a rover," Vina said wistfully. "Lang, can I go with him when he leaves?" "You haven't completed basic ecology. Mentor's waiting for your afternoon session." Vina pouted and went outside to her robot. Lang grinned. "The precocious brat's beginning to ask him questions he can't answer. Soon I'll have to install a few more circuits. Saxon shivered. Regardless of scientific attainment, any culture is vulnerable to inhibition. So said his agent's handbook. Later he met Vina's mother, Merle, a handsome woman with calm grey eyes who served them dinner by firelight. It was a good dinner. These colonists seemed like good people. A shame they qualified for inhibition. Gently, Saxon began to probe. In only 6 generations, the colonists had scattered throughout the entire hemisphere. Although the matrix of their culture seemed to be the individual family unit, they lived according to whim. Some lived in small communal groups, some lived alone. Some, by choice, were wanderers, rovers. They had science. Their philosophy seemed nebulous, based on a benevolent ecology, brotherhood with all living things. Saxon frowned. 6 generations ago, the ecology on this world hardly had been benevolent for man. This area of the continent had been a steaming marsh swarming with hungry saurians. Now it was all meadow and forest. Saxon said thoughtfully, "Have you ever felt the need for organization? For a leader?" He leaned back and waited for the seed to sprout. 2 years ago on Eden 8, near Rigel, he had said the same thing to a 6th-generation shaman, and it took scarcely a month for the shaman to start an intra-tribal war. But now the seed fell on sterile ground. Lang said, "I don't understand. Any problem which cannot be solved at family level is referred to the annual council." "A leader," Saxon was patient. "One strong man to represent everybody, to settle all problems as he sees fit." "Remember, father," Vina prodded, "those arboreal cannibals grandfather used to mention. They had a nomadic tribal culture based on brute strength." Lang nodded somberly. "Good analogy. The most favorable extrapolation indicated a racial life expectancy of only 10,000 years. Their emotional stability index was nil. They would eventually have destroyed themselves. The first generation decided it would be more merciful to exterminate them. An unwise decision, I think." He launched into a spirited ethnological discussion with Vina, and Saxon sat numbly. They had no emotional insecurity to feed, no power hunger, no herd instinct to pervert, nothing to utilize as destruction potential. No cultural weakness. The room they gave him was small and comfortable. For a time he lay on the sleeping hammock considering the situation. He was beginning to like them. That in itself was dangerous. The house was very still. He got quietly out of the hammock and crept towards the door. He had to get back to the lifeboat to feed facts into the monitor. One thing disturbed him. According to his agent's handbook, family group anarchies didn't need inhibition. He was halfway across the ploughed field when Mentor's iron voice said, "Good evening." Moonfire glimmered on metal. The robot stood impassively before him. Saxon said slowly, "I was just going for a walk." "You are our guest. I shall walk with you." "I prefer to walk alone." "Guests prefer company. The House of Lang must observe the basic amenities." Was there a hint of sardonicism in Mentor's voice? They walked along the furrows, man and robot. Saxon felt beneath his shirt for the utility kit. He kept his voice level. "Am I a prisoner?" "You are a guest." "Did Vina tell you I might try to escape?" A pause while relays clicked silently. "That is classified information." Saxon's fingers were steady as they touched his tiny blaster. "Benevolent anarchy indeed." He said carefully, "Do the colonists resent their exile?" Another pause. Mentor's voice was a flat drone. "The concept is meaningless, the question invalid." Like hell it is, thought Saxon, and fired. A cold blue wash of energy illuminated the robot. For a moment, Saxon was blinded. When vision returned, he saw Mentor standing immobile, unscathed. Please go back to bed, the robot said. Saxon went back to bed. Next morning, Vina brought him breakfast. She seemed sad, withdrawn. Lang and Merle went to visit Aunt Tarsi. She lives near the equator. They won't be back till evening. How? Saxon had trouble breathing. How did they go? By transmitter, of course. She indicated a large shimmering platform in one corner. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot rovers hate the mention of any type of gadgetry. Her eyes grew impossibly earnest. But we try to achieve some kind of balance, really. Once, when I suggested that Father let Mentor help him plough the fields, he got furious. Saxon restrained wild laughter. First the robot, invulnerable to atomic energy, now a matter transmitter. Yet they ploughed their own fields. Vina, he said. She looked up at him. Why did you tell Mentor to keep me here? She bowed her bright head. Her blue eyes were brimming. Why, Vina? Because I like you, she sniffled. I wanted you to stay. Abruptly, she fled from the room. He stood bleakly looking after her. After a time, he went outside and struck across the field towards the forest. This time, the robot did not stop him. Do not allow the emotional charm of any culture nor any individual of that culture to sway your inhibition appraisal. In the narrow confines of the lifeboat, he repeated the quotation grimly. Good inhibition agents are inflexible. He was a good agent. For almost an hour he fed data into the monitor tapes. Then he touched a stud and closed his eyes, waiting for judgment. Agricultural family group societies are normally stagnant, the monitor droned. Such cultures, regardless of technological level, do not warrant inhibition of any type. Reference 12th generation check on Eden 5. The room spun. Saxon whispered, But they have cybernetics, matter transmitters. Regardless of technological level, the monitor was adamant. This was madness. Saxon wiped his forehead and said, Assuming geographical isolation, no barrier to united group action in the event of emergency. United action is incompatible with family group. Assume and advise. Relays chattered. Abruptly, the entire panel flashed crimson. The monitor spoke one word. Annihilation. Saxon referred to his inhibition handbook. He had never annihilated a culture before. 1 hour later he went into the forest. Birds sang overhead. The sun dappled him in light and shadow. He stalked a small furry quadruped that squealed at him from a log and brought it down with his sonic pistol. Back in the lifeboat he watched the animal regain consciousness in an airtight tank, and very slowly he pulled a lever. A green vapour rolled into the tank. The quadruped screamed. The green vapour fed. It was the penultimate in sporedom, yet it was more than a spore. It had virus characteristics, and its propagation rate was almost mathematically impossible. There was no known defense, and once used, the entire planet was forever untouchable. To Saxon's knowledge, it had been utilized only once on Eden 1. At dusk, he took the lifeboat up 50 miles. He released the spores in a widening spiral and finally jettisoned the tank. He went into an orbit at 10,000 miles and waited. It would take approximately a week. It was a long week. Saxon slept little. He paced the cabin. He looked at the stars and thought about a blue-eyed waif with tears in her voice begging him to stay. After a week, the lifeboat came down at the edge of a grassy plain. Saxon took a sample of the contaminated atmosphere to determine propagation rate. The atmosphere was pure. Some freak of expansion. One uncontaminated spot in a hemisphere of death. He selected another location, then another. That evening he closed the coordinates of his original landing site and tested the air again. Finally, he went outside the airlock. He breathed deeply, and the air was fresh and sweet. It smelled of forest and cool streams and evening dew. In the blue dusk, birds twittered. A small marsupial, very much like a squirrel, scampered to the safety of a tree and scolded him. Saxon began walking. At the edge of the forest he saw the familiar ploughed field. The farmhouse was a friendly beacon in the twilight. "Hello," Vina said. She stood at the edge of the forest. She was smiling. "Welcome home, Rover." For the next few days, Saxon was the perfect guest. He argued philosophical abstractions with the family by firelight. By day he hiked in the woods with Vina and listened to Mentor give her lessons. He asked questions. "Vina, do you know what a microorganism is?" "Benevolent or malignant?" "Malignant. A plague." She pursed her lips. "Organic or cultural?" "Organic, of course." "Bacteria," Vina shrugged. "Quite a few of the first generation died immediately after the landing. Until they adapted, until they analysed the basic metabolism of the planet's dominant life forms and constructed a neutralizer." "A neutralizer?" "A protective shell of ionized particles," she said patiently, "keyed to the individual body chemistry." "Classified information," Mentor droned. Saxon licked his lips. "You mentioned cultural microorganisms." "Much more deadly. I call them that, but Lang says I'm being semantically unsound. War, for example. Racial inferiority. To date, we haven't found a cure." She broke off and her eyes were shining wet. "But you don't have wars," Saxon said. "No." "Then—" "We have a ghetto," the girl said slowly. "I can't tell you about it. Perhaps soon." Abruptly she changed the subject. Slowly Saxon's defences began to crumble. To all intents he was now a member of Lang's household, Vina's adopted big brother. Big brother or pet? It did not really matter. On the fourth day he went back to the lifeboat. He remembered his graduation day, the crash of the corps anthem and the pledge. "I do faithfully swear to uphold the ideals of man, to use this vested power for the absolute good of Earth. I will not shrink from any cup of duty, regardless of how bitter. I will guard stasis with my life and the lives of innocent people if need be, people whose only crime may be that they are potential threats to stasis." He tinkered with the ship's reactor for an hour. Then he ran. Behind him, the lifeboat dissolved in a white blossom of flame. Farewell the cold stars and the ache and the loneliness. Farewell the destruction of newborn colonies to secure the rotting stagnancy of Earth. He would have a great many bad nights, but he was used to bad nights. He thought of Vina and his stride quickened. She would be a beautiful woman. They were waiting for him back at the farmhouse, Lang, Vina and Merle. They were staring at the dark pyre of smoke in the forest. Saxon took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. "I've got a confession to make." They weren't listening. Lang said quietly, "You were right, Vina. He may qualify." "Come," Merle took her husband's arm. "Let's call the council." They went inside. Saxon looked at Vina. He moistened his lips. "You knew," he said. She nodded. There was a queer adult maturity about her as she said, "Wait, they're calling an emergency council meeting to decide if you're fit." "Fit," Saxon said. Coldly it seeped in. To survive? To be a playmate? A slave? "It's been a game," he said, grasping her shoulders. "You've known all along." "They're taking the transmitter to the landing site now," she said. "Would you like to watch?" Watch Judgment of the Outcasts on one of those who had marooned them? Why not? Lang and Merle were no longer in the house. Vina touched a silver stud in one corner, and one side of the room dissolved from a vista of golden wheat to a grassy amphitheatre. There were people assembled in the clearing. Lang and Merle stood on a mossy dais making a speech. He saw the ship. It was a giant silver ovoid fretted with strange veins pockmarked by the red cancer of rust. Towering forest patriarchs guarded that ship like a woodland shrine. A ship that had never been born on Earth. An alien ship. Understanding came and a quiet horror. He lurched away from the screen, away from Vina. He was outside now and running. He was a good inhibition agent. He had been conditioned to the shock of alien concepts for half his lifetime, but the ground reeled beneath him as he ran, and he could feel the hot trickle of blood where he had bitten through his lip to keep from screaming. Aliens. From outside. Homo superior treating his ape brother with an hospitable contempt, playing their inscrutable game. The lifeboat came down almost in front of him. It came down with a whining snarl and settled into the ploughed field. The airlock opened. Primus Gant stepped out. His blue eyes were very cold and he was smiling. "Report, Commander." Years of conditioned reflex brought him erect, made him whisper, "Mission unsuccessful." He swayed, almost fell. Gant held him. "Easy, lad. We got the blow-up a few minutes ago. It took us a while to home in on the distress transmitter in your utility kit." He chuckled at Saxon's blank stare. "Whenever an agent ship is destroyed, his utility belt automatically functions as a distress signal." Saxon shook his head painfully. "You've been waiting?" "We started 10 days ago when your monitor gave out with the annihilation alarm." He eyed Saxon keenly. "Just how bad is it?" Saxon told him. Gant's face turned a dirty white. "Aliens," he said thickly. "They probably murdered the original colony. You've come through nicely, lad. It may mean promotion." He turned into the ship. "Come on." "Wait." Saxon's voice was a dry whisper. "You're not going to—" "Demolition," Gant said. "I've got a task force up there that can crack a planet. Let's go, Commander." "I will not shrink from any cup of duty." "Please," Saxon said huskily. "I don't believe they're inimical to man. They're altruists." "So?" "They're benevolent," Saxon pleaded. "Both races can live together." "Don't be a fool," Gant grunted and turned into the airlock. Saxon leapt. One palm came down hard at the base of the director's skull. And Gant twisted. He palmed the younger man with 2 deft blows, throat and plexus. Saxon slumped, retching. Gant stood above him, his smile strained. "Amateur," he panted. "I was instructing hand tactics before you were born." He took out his blaster. "They've infected you," he said compassionately. "I'm sorry, lad. You'll get a posthumous decoration." The blaster came up, steadied. Then Gant stood very still, a white-haired statue. Mentor came around the ship and helped Saxon to his feet. "Destroying guests is forbidden," the robot clicked. "The concept is irrational." Later, in the shadows of the farmhouse that was not a farmhouse, Saxon watched the scout disappear into the sky. He turned towards Vina. "You're letting him go?" "Mentor treated him," she said dreamily. "He'll report that you destroyed the colony, died in the process, and this planet is unfit for further colonization. Incidentally, the council voted in the affirmative. Otherwise you'd be with Gant." Aliens playing a game with their ape brother. Recognizing him at first glance, speaking his language, making him feel wanted, at home. Why? He was afraid to ask the question. "We're on a vacation," Vina said. "We've only been here for 1 generation. We were due to return almost 30 years ago, but we found your colony." "Did you—" "Isolation," she murmured. "The ghetto. They're sick," she said. "Infected with the culture plague. We couldn't leave them and we couldn't help them." Her gaze was very steady.
Until you came.
It came to him. Man clutching at the knees of gods, envying, striving futilely, finally hating. Only man can help man.
It's not fair,
Saxon breathed. He took Vina by the shoulders, made her look at him.
I'm happy here. You and Lang, Merle. I'm just beginning to learn. I'd hoped that in a few years... We are not human, Vina said gently, and our lifespan is 400 of your years.
For the first time he noticed the faint malformation of her ears, the subtle differences in facial bone structure. He glanced past her, saw Lang and Merle waiting in the doorway.
It will mean months of study, she said. You have so much to unlearn, to understand. They may reject you, sacrifice you. That will not matter. What does matter is your impact on their culture, what it will mean 1,000 generations hence.
Diseased apes with a touch of godhood suffering from an infection that might be forever incurable. Why should he be the sacrifice? Who was he to help them? Looking at Vina, he knew the answer. Competition by James Causey. Narrated by William Skye. They would learn what caused the murderous disease, if it was the last thing they did. Greta, January 18th, Earth time. I wish Max would treat me like a woman. An hour ago, at dinner, John Armitage proposed a toast, especially for my benefit. He loves to play the gallant. Big man, silver mane, very blue eyes, a porcelain smile. The head of WSC, the perfect example of the politician-scientist. To the colony, he announced, raising his glass. May Epsilon love them and keep them. May it only be transmittal trouble. Amen, Max said. We drank. Taylor Bishop put down his glass precisely. Bishop is a grey little man with a diffident voice that belies his reputation as the best biochemist in the system. Has Farragut hinted otherwise? He asked mildly. Armitage frowned. It would be scarcely prudent for Senator Farragut to alarm the populace with disaster rumours. Bishop looked at him out of his pale eyes. Besides, it's an election year. The silence was suddenly ugly. Then Armitage chuckled. All right, he said. So the senator wants to be a national hero. The fact still remains that Epsilon had better be habitable, or Pan-Asia will scream we're hogging it. They want war anyway. Within a month, boom. For a moment I was afraid he was going to make a speech about Earth's suffocating billions, the screaming tension of the Cold War, and the sacred necessity of our mission. If he had, I'd have gotten the weeping shrieks. Some responsibilities are too great to think about. But instead, he winked at me. For the first time, I began to realize why Armitage was the director of the Scientists' World Council. Hypothesis, Greta, he said. Epsilon is probably a paradise. Why should the test colony let the rest of the world in on it? They're being selfish. I giggled. We relaxed. After supper, Armitage played chess with Bishop, while I followed Max into the control room. Soon, I said. Planet fall in 18 hours, Doctor. He said it stiffly, busying himself at the controls. Max is a small, dark man with angry eyes and the saddest mouth I've ever seen. He is also a fine pilot and magnificent bacteriologist. I wanted to slap him. I hate these professional British types that think a female biochemist is some sort of freak. Honestly, I said, what do you think? Disease, he said bitterly. For the first 6 months they reported on schedule, remember? A fine, clean planet, no dominant life forms, perfect for immigration, unique, 1 world in a billion. Abruptly they stopped sending. You figure it. I thought about it. I read your thematic on Venusian viruses, he said abruptly. Good show. You should be an asset to us, Doctor. Thanks, I snapped. I was so furious that I inadvertently looked into the cabin viewplate. Bishop had warned me. It takes years of deep space-time to enable a person to stare at the naked universe without screaming. It got me. The crystal thunder of the stars, that horrible, hungry blackness. I remember I was sort of crying and fighting, then Max had me by the shoulders, holding me gently. He was murmuring and stroking my hair. After a time, I stopped whimpering. "Thanks," I whispered. "You'd better get some sleep, Greta," he said. I turned in. I think I'm falling in love. January 19th. Today we made planetfall. It took Max a few hours to home in on the test colony ship. He finally found it on the shore of an inland sea that gleamed like wrinkled blue satin. For a time we cruised in widening spirals, trying to detect some signs of life. There was nothing. We finally landed. Max and Armitage donned spacesuits and went toward the colony ship. They came back in a few hours, very pale. "They're dead," Armitage's voice cracked as he came out of the airlock. "All of them." "Skeletons," Max said. "How?" Bishop said. Armitage's hands were shaking as he poured a drink. "Looks like civil war." "But there were 100 of them," I whispered. "They were dedicated." "I wonder," Bishop said thoughtfully. "White and brown and yellow. Russian and British and French and German and Chinese and Spanish. They were chosen for technical background rather than emotional stability." "Rot," Armitage said like drums beating. "It's some alien bug, some toxin. We've got to isolate it. Find an antibody." He went to work. January 22nd. I'm scared. It's taken 3 days to finalize the atmospheric tests. Oxygen, nitrogen, helium with trace gases. Those trace gases are stinkers. Bishop discovered a new inert gas, heavier than xenon. He's excited. I'm currently checking stuff that looks like residual organic, and I'm not too happy about it. Still, this atmosphere seems pure. Armitage is chafing. "It's in the flora," he insisted today. "Something, perhaps, that they ate." He stood with a strained tautness, staring feverishly at the chronometer. "Senator Farragut's due to make contact soon. What'll I tell him?" "That we're working on it," Bishop said dryly. "That the 4 best scientists in the galaxy are working toward the solution." "That's good," Armitage said seriously. "But they'll worry. You are making progress." I wanted to wrap a pestle around his neck. We were all in the control room an hour later. Armitage practically stood at attention while Farragut's voice boomed from the transmitter. It was very emetic. The senator said the entire hemisphere was waiting for us to announce the planet was safe for immigration. He said the stars were a challenge to man. He spoke fearfully of the coming world crisis. Epsilon was man's last chance for survival. Armitage assured him our progress was satisfactory, that within a few days we would have something tangible to report. The senator said we were heroes. Finally, it was over. Max yawned. "Wonder how many voters start field work at once." Armitage frowned. "It's not funny, Cizon. Not funny at all. Inasmuch as we've checked out the atmosphere, I suggest we start field work at once." Taylor blinked. "We're still testing a few residual—" "I happen to be nominal leader of this party." Armitage stood very tall, very determined. "Obviously the atmosphere is pure. Let's make some progress." February 2nd. This is progress? For the past 10 days we've worked the clock around. Quantitative analysis, soil, water, flora, fauna, cellular, microscopic. Nothing. Max has discovered a few lethal alkaloids in some greenish tree fungus, but I doubt if the colony were indiscriminate fungus eaters. Bishop has found a few new unicellular types, but nothing dangerous. There's one tentacled thing that reminds me of a frightened rotifer. Max named it Armitagium. Armitage is pleased. Perhaps the fate of the 100 colonists will remain one of those forever unsolved mysteries, like the fate of the Mary Celeste or the starship Prometheus. This planet's clean. February 4th. Today Max and I went specimen hunting. It must be autumn on Epsilon. Everywhere the trees are a riot of scarlet and ochre, the scrubby bushes are shedding their leaves. Once we came upon a field of thistle-like plants with spiny seed pods that opened as we watched, the purple spores drifting afield in an eddy of tinted mist. Max said it reminded him of Scotland. He kissed me. On the way back to the ship we saw 2 skeletons. Each had its fingers tightly locked about the other's throat. February 20th. We have, to date, analysed 900 types of plant life for toxin content. Bishop has tested innumerable spores and bacteria. Our slide file is immense and still growing. Max has captured several insects. There is one tiny yellow bush spider with a killing bite, but the species seem to be rare. Bishop has isolated a mould bacterium that could cause a high fever, but its propagation rate is far too low to enable it to last long in the bloodstream. The most dangerous animal seems to be a 2-foot-tall arthropod. They're rare and peaceable. Bishop vivisected one yesterday and found nothing alarming. Last night I dreamed about the first expedition. I dreamed they all committed suicide because Epsilon was too good for them. This is ridiculous. We're working in a sort of quiet madness, getting no closer to the solution. Armitage talked to Senator Farragut yesterday and hinted darkly that the first ship's hydroponic system went haywire and that an improper carbohydrate imbalance killed the colony. Pretty thin. Farragut's getting impatient. Bishop looks haggard. Max looks grim. February 23rd. Our quantitative tests are slowing down. We play a rubber of bridge each night before retiring. Last night I trumped Max's ace and he snarled at me. We had a fight. This morning I found a bouquet of purple spore thistles at my cabin door. Max is sweet. This afternoon, by mutual consent, we all knocked off work and played bridge. Bishop noticed the thistle bouquet in a vase over the chronometer. He objected. "They're harmless," Max said. "Besides, they smell nice." I can hardly wait for tomorrow's rubber. Our work is important, but one does need relaxation. February 25th. Armitage is cheating. Yesterday he failed to score one of my over tricks. We argued bitterly about it. Taylor, of course, sided with him. 3 hands later, Armitage got the bid in hearts. 150 honours, he announced. That's a lie, I said. It was only 100, he grinned, but thank you, Greta. Now I shan't try the Queen finesse. No wonder they've won the last 3 evenings. Max is furious with them both. February 28th. We played all day. Max and I kept losing. I always knew Armitage was a pompous toad, but I never realised he was slimy. This afternoon it was game all, and Armitage overcalled my diamond opener with 3 spades. Bishop took him to 4, and I doubled, counting on my ace-king of hearts and diamonds. I led out my diamond ace, and Armitage trumped from his hand. Bishop laid down his dummy. He had clubs and spades solid, with doubleton hearts and diamonds. None? Max asked Armitage dangerously. Armitage tittered. I wanted to scratch his eyes out. He drew trump immediately and set up clubs on board, dumping the heart losers from his hand and finally sluffing 2 diamonds. Made 7, he said complacently. Less 2 for the diamond renege makes 5, 1 over trick doubled. We were vulnerable, so it's game and rubber. I gasped. You reneged deliberately? Certainly. Doubleton in hearts and diamonds in my hand. If you get in, I'm down 1. As it was, I made an over trick. The only penalty for a renege is 2 tricks. The rulebook does not differentiate between deliberate and accidental reneges. Sorry. I stared at his florid throat, at his jugular. I could feel my mouth twitching. On the next hand, I was dummy. I excused myself and went into the lab. I found a scalpel. I came up quietly behind Armitage, and Bishop saw what I was going to do and shouted, and I was not nearly fast enough. Armitage ducked and Bishop tackled me. Thanks, dear, Max said thoughtfully, looking at the cards scattered on the floor. We would have been set 1 trick. Club finesse fails. She's crazy! Armitage's mouth worked. The strain's too much for her. I cried. I apologized hysterically. After a while, I convinced them I was all right. Max gave me a sedative. We did not play any more bridge. Over supper, I kept staring at Armitage's throat. After eating, I went for a long walk. When I got back to the ship, everyone was sleeping. March 1st. Bishop found Armitage this morning in his cabin. He came out very pale, staring at me. You bitch, he said. Ear to ear. Now what'll I do for a partner? You can't prove it, I said. We'll have to confine her to quarters, Max said wearily. I'll tell Farragut. And let him know the expedition is failing? Max sighed. You're right. We'll tell them Armitage had an accident. I said seriously. It was obviously suicide. His mind snapped. Oh, God, Max said. They buried Armitage this afternoon. From my cabin, I watched them dig the grave. Cheaters never prosper. March 2nd. Max talked with Senator Farragut this morning. He said Armitage had died a hero's death. Farragut sounds worried. The Pan-Asians have withdrawn their embassy from Imperial Africa. Tension is mounting on the home front. Immigration must start this week. Max was very reassuring. Just a few final tests, Senator. We want to make sure. We putted in our laboratories all afternoon. Bishop seemed bored. After dinner, he suggested three-handed bridge, and Max said he knew a better game, a friendly game his grandmother had taught him. Hearts. March 5th. It's a plot. All day long, Bishop and Max have managed to give me the Queen of Spades. It's deliberate, of course. 3 times I've tried for the moon, and Bishop has held out one damned little heart at the end. Once, Max was slightly ahead on points, and Bishop demanded to see the score. I thought for a moment they would come to blows, but Bishop apologized. It's just that I hate to lose, he said. Quite, Max said. When we finally turned in, Bishop was ahead on points. Too far ahead. March 6th. I suppose it's Bishop's laugh. It has a peculiar horse-like stridency that makes me want to tear out his throat. Twice today I've broken down and cried when he made a jackpot. I'm not going to cry any more. Supper was the usual, beef yeast and vita ale. I remember setting Bishop's plate in front of him and the way his pale eyes gleamed between mouthfuls. 3,000 points ahead, he gloated. You'll never catch me now. Never, never. That was when he gripped his throat and began writhing on the floor. Max felt his pulse. He stared at me. Very nice, he said. Quick. Did you use a derivative of that green fungus? I said nothing. Max's nostrils were white and pinched. Must I make an autopsy? Why bother? I said. It's obviously heart failure. Yes, why bother? He said. He looked tired. Stay in your cabin, Greta. I'll bring your meals. I don't trust you. His laughter had a touch of madness. March 10th. Max unlocked my cabin door this morning. He looked drawn. Listen, he said. I've checked my respiration, pulse, saliva, temperature. All normal. So? Come here, he said. I followed him into the lab. He indicated a microscope. His eyes were bright. Well? A drop of my blood, he said. Look. I squinted into the microscope. I saw purple discs. Oddly, they did not attack the red blood cells. There was no fission, no mitosis. The leukocytes, strangely enough, let them alone. My hands were shaking as I took a sterile slide and pricked my finger. I put the slide under the microscope. I adjusted the lens and stared. Purple discs, swimming in my bloodstream, thriving, minding their own business. Me too, I said. They're inert, Max said hoarsely. They don't affect metabolism, cause fever, or interfere with the body chemistry in any way. Do they remind you of anything? I thought about it. Then I went to the slide file that was marked Flora negative. Right, Max said. The purple thistle. Spores. The atmosphere is clogged with them. Greta, my sweet, we're infected. I feel fine, I said. All day long we ran tests. Negative tests. We seemed to be disgustingly healthy. Symbiosis, Max said finally. Live and let live. Apparently we're hosts. Only one thing disturbs me. Most symbiotes do something for their host. Something to enhance the host's survival potential. We played chess this evening. I won. Max is furious. He's such a poor sport. March 11th. Max talked with Senator Farragut this morning. He gave Epsilon a clean bill of health and the senator thanked God. The first starship will leave tonight, the senator said. Right on schedule with 10,000 colonists aboard. You're world heroes. Max and I played chess the rest of the day. Max won consistently. He utilizes a fianchetto that is utterly impregnable. If he wins tomorrow, I shall have to kill him. Max, March 13th. It was, of course, necessary for me to destroy Armitage and Bishop. They won far too often. But I am sorry about Greta. Yet I had to strangle her. If she hadn't started that infernal Queen's Pawn opening, it would have been different. She beat me 6 times running, and on the last game I pulled a superb orangutan, but it was too late. She saw mate in 4 and gave me that serpent smirk I know so well. How could I have ever been in love with her? March 14th. Frightfully boring to be alone. I have a thought. Chess. Right hand against left. White and black. Jolly good. March 16th. I haven't much time. Left was black this morning, and I beat him 4 out of 5. We're in the lab now. He's watching me scribble this. His thumb and forefinger are twitching in fury. He looks like some great white spider about to spring. He sees the scalpel by the microscope. Now his fingers are inching toward it. Treacherous beast. I'm stronger. If he tries to amputate...
If you're enjoying the stories, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button as it helps the channel grow. Thanks.
Exploiter's End by James Causey. Narrated by William Skye. People or termites, it's all the same. There's a limit to how far you can drive them. We time-studied the term. It moved with a pliant, liquid grace, its forearms flickering over the instrument panel, installing studs, tightening screws, its antennae glowing with the lambent yellow that denoted an agony of effort. See? Harvey's freckled face was smug. He rates an easy 110. Whoever took that first study? I took it, I said, squinting at the stopwatch. You could hear him bite his lip. After only 2 weeks on the job, on a strange planet 90 light-years from home, you don't tell your boss he's cockeyed. The term hurried. Its faceted termite eyes were expressionless diamonds, but the antennae gleamed a desperate saffron. If bugs could sweat, I thought wryly. Now the quartz panel installation. Those forearms moved in a blinding frenzy. But the stopwatch was faster. The second hand caught up with the term. It passed him. Rating 74%. I tucked the clipboard under my arm, squeezed through the airlock and down the ramp. Harvey followed sullenly. The conveyor groaned on, bringing up the next unit, a sleek little cruiser. The term seized a 50-pound air wrench, fled up the ramp to the airlock. 12 feet back to the operation, I pointed out. After the next job, he'll have to return 40 feet, then 60. He's in the hole. Harvey looked at his shoes. John Barry, the trim superintendent, came puffing down the line, his jowled face anxious about direct labour cost, the way every good super should be. Anything wrong, Jake? He can't cut it, I said. Barry frowned up through the airlock at the term. Those antennae now shone the soft, sad purple of despair. We walked past the body jigs. The air was a haze of blue smoke, punctuated with yellow splashes of flame from the electronic welding guns. Terms scuttled like gigantic spiders over the great silver hulls, their antennae glowing in a pattern of swift, bright harmony, right on standard, good cost. Harvey's face was rapt as he watched them. I said harshly, "Give me your third production axiom." Harvey's shoulders squared. He said stiffly, "Beauty is functional. The quintessence of grace is the clean, soaring beauty of a spaceship's hull." "Extrapolate, Harvey." His lips were tight. "What I see is ugly. Terms must be taught individuality. What I see is a fascinating, deadly beauty. Deadly because it's useless. We must sublimate it, grind it down, hammer it out into a useful pattern. Waste motion is a sin." "Excellent." We turned into the administration lift, leaving the iron roar behind us, and on the way up Harvey didn't say a word. I listened for the tinkle of shattering ideals and said patiently, "You're here to build spaceships, to build them better and cheaper than Consolidated or Solar. Hell, we've even set up a village for the terms. Electricity, plumbing, luxuries they wouldn't normally enjoy for the next 1,000,000 years." "Will they fire him?" Harvey's voice was flat. My temper was shredding. 4-day layoff, his third this month. Terms kick in most of their salary for village maintenance. They can't afford a part-time producer. I could see that term read out of the gang, leaving the company village stoically, while his fellows played a wailing dirge of colour on their antennae. The farewell song. I could see him trudging over the windswept peak of Cobalt Mountain, staring down at his native village and shaking with the impact of the Stammverstand, the tribe mind, the ache and the longing. A wheel, shaken out of orbit. The lonely cog searching for its lost slot. I could see that term returning to his tribe, and how they'd tear him to pieces because he was a thing apart now, an alien. We walked down the grey corridor, past Psych, past the conference hall, to the silver door marked Methods and Standards. Harvey's blue eyes were remote, stubborn. I clapped him paternally on the shoulder. "Anyone can call one wrong, lad. Forget it." Harvey slumped down at a computer, and I walked into my private office and shut the door. Harvey's personal dossier was at my desk. IQ 178. Fair. Stability quotient 2.8. Very bad. Adaptability rating 0.7. Borderline. Those idiots in Psych. Couldn't they indoctrinate a new man properly? I waited. In a moment, Harvey came in without knocking and said, "Mr. Egan, I want to quit." I took my time lighting a cigar, not raising my head. His defiant, pleading look. I blew smoke rings at the Visicom and finally said, "Since you were 16 you've dreamed of this. Elimination tests, the weeding out, 10,000 other smart, hungry kids fighting you for this job." I tasted the words. "When your contract's up, you can write your own ticket anywhere in the system." He blurted, "I came here full of ideas about the wonderful work Amalgamated was doing to advance backward civilizations. Sure, the terms have a union. They're paid at standard galactic rates for spacecraft assembly. But you make them live in that village. It costs to run that village. You give it to them with one hand and take it back with the other. All the time you're holding out the promise of racial advancement, individuality. Someday the terms will reach the stars. Nuts." "That's guild propaganda," I said softly. "The guild is just a bogey you created to keep the intersolar spacecrafters union in line. There's a Venusport liner due in next week. When it leaves, I'll be on it." I played Dutch uncle. I told him he wasn't used to Terminorb's 1.5 gravs, that this was just a hangover from the 3:5 oxygen ratio he wasn't used to. But he said no. Finally I shrugged, scribbled something on an AVO and handed it to him. "All right, Harvey," I said mildly. "Take this down to Carmody and Psych. He'll give you a clearance." Harvey's face went white. "Since when do you go to Psych for a clearance?" I pressed a stud under the desk and 2 analysts came in. I told them what to do, and Harvey screamed. He fought and bit and clawed. He mouthed unutterable things about what we were doing to the terms until I chopped him mercifully behind the ear. "Poor devil," panted one of the analysts. "Obviously insufficient indoctrination, sir. Would you mind if I spent an hour in Psych for reorientation? He upset me." My eyes stung with pride. Sam had loyalty plus. "Sure thing, Sam. You better go too, Barney. He said some pretty ugly things." They dragged Harvey out and I went over to the Visicom, punched a button. I was trembling with an icy rage as Carmody's lean hawk face swam into view. "Hello, Jake," he said languidly. "How's cost?" I told him curtly about Harvey. "Another weak sister," I rasped. "Can't you screen them any more? Didn't you note his stability index? I'm going to report this to Starza, Don." "Relax," Carmody smiled. "Those things happen, Jake. We'll do a few gentle things with scalpel and narcosynthesis, and he'll be back in a week, real eager. The perfect cost analyst." I'd never liked Carmody. He was so smug, he didn't realise the sacredness of his position. I said coldly, "Put Miss Davis on." Carmody's grin was knowing. The screen flickered and Fern's face came into focus. Her moist red lips parted and I shivered looking at her, even on a Visicom screen. The shining glory of her hair, those cool green eyes. 3 months hadn't made a difference. "How was little old Earth?" I said awkwardly. "Wonderful," she was radiant. "I'll see you for lunch. Today's grievance day. Dinner?" "I promised Don," she said demurely. I swallowed hard. "How about the term festival tomorrow night?" "Well, Don sort of asked." I tried to laugh it off and Fern said she'd see me later and the screen went blank and I sat there, shaking. The screen flickered again. Starz's great moon face smiled at me and said sweetly, "We're ready to start grieving." I picked up the time studies that were death sentences for 2 terms and went down the hall to Ulcer Gulch, the conference room. Lure a termite away from his tribe. Promise him the stars. Make him bust his thorax on an assembly line. He makes a wonderful worker, with reflexes twice as fast as a human's, but he still isn't an individual. Even when putting a spaceship together, he's still part of the tribe, part of a glowing symphony of colour and motion. That's bad for production. Accent on individuality, that was the keynote. The terms and their union representatives could argue a grievance right to the letter of the contract, but when it came to production standards, we had them. Terminorb 4 was 90 light-years from the system, and the terms couldn't afford a Home Office time and motion analyst. It wasn't worth it. Terms were expendable. Los Tichnat was committeeman-at-large for the term local. He sat regally at the head of the conference table, 7 gleaming chitinous feet of him, with his softly pulsating antennae and faceted eyes, and said in a clicking, humorless voice, "The first item is a second-stage grievance. Brother Nadkek, in final assembly, was laid off for 1 day. Reason, he missed an operation. The grievance, of course, is a mere formality. You will deny it." Dave Starzer winked at me from behind horn-rimmed glasses. He sat like some great bland Buddha, director of industrial relations, genius in outer psychology, ruthless, soft-spoken, anticipator of alien trends. He said in that beautiful velvet voice, "Ordinarily, yes. In this case, Nadkek wished to ask his foreman about omitting a welding phase of the operation. While the suggestion was declined, Nadkek showed unmistakable initiative." Starzer stressed the word. "We appreciate his interest in the job. He will receive pay for the lost day." Around the table, antennae flashed amazed colours. A precedent had been set. Interest in the job transcended even the contract. "Management sustains the grievance," Tichnat droned incredulously. "Of course," Starzer said. Nadkek left the conference room, his antennae a puzzled mauve. "Next," Starzer said pontifically. The next grievance was simply that a foreman had spoken harshly to a term. The term resented it. In his tribe he had been a fighter, prime guardian of the Queen Mother. Fighters could not be reprimanded as could spinners or workers. Starzer and Tichnat split hairs while I dozed and thought about Fern. Starzer finally promised to reprimand the foreman. It was lovely the way he thumped on the table, aflame with righteousness, his voice golden thunder, the martyr hurt by Tichnat's unfairness, yet so eager to compromise, to be fair. The next grievance was work standards. Starzer looked at me. This one mattered. This was cost. I pulled out my study proofs, said, "Radnor in final assembly, consistently in the hole, rating 74%. "The operation was too tight, Jake. Admit it." The thought uncoiled darkly, thundering and reverberating in the horrified caverns of my brain. A thoughtcaster. So the guild had thoughtcasters now. The guild had finally come. I sat in the dank silence, shaking. A drop of ice crawled slowly down my temple. I stared around the conference table at Starzer's frown, at those term faces, the great faceted eyes. "We gave this worker every chance," I said, licking my lips. "We put him on another operation. He still couldn't cut it. Even though we've got production to meet, we still give as many chances." The thought slashed. It grew into a soundless roar. "Stop it, Jake! Tell them how Amalgamated under the cloak of liberation is strangling the terms with an alien culture. Tell them what a mockery their contract really is. Tell them about that term you condemned this morning." I fought it. Feeling the blood run from my lip, I fought it. I'd seen strong men driven insane by a thoughtcaster within seconds. My stability index was 6.3, damned high. I fought it. I got to my feet. The room reeled. Those damned term faces, the shining antennae. I stumbled towards the door. The thought became a whiplash of molten fury. Uphold that grievance, Jake. Tell them the truth. Admit the standard was impossible to meet. I slammed the door. The voice stopped. My skull was a shattered flywheel, a sunburst of agony. I was retching. I stumbled down the corridor to Psych. Fern was there. I was screaming at her. The guild was here. They had thoughtcasters. My brain was melting. Fern was white-faced. She had a hypo. I didn't feel it. The last thing I saw was the glimmer of tears in her green eyes. The neuron flow. Starz's voice. No two alike. Like fingerprints. What a pity they can't refine the transmittal waves. I tried to open my eyes. The guild atomized Solar's plant on Proicon, Carmody's voice said quietly. It's just a question of time, Dave. No, Starza said thoughtfully. Proicon was a sweatshop. I think maybe they're hinting that our production standards are a trifle rough. Look, his eyelids fluttered. Bet you he takes refuge in amnesia. You lose. My voice was an iron groan. We were in Starza's office. Carmody peered at me with a clinical eye. I took the liberty of narcosynthesis while you were out, Jake. You told us all about it. How do you feel? I told them how I felt in spades. I want my vacation now, I said. I've accrued 7 months. I'm going to Venus, I said. Now, Starza said. Mustn't desert the sinking ship, Jake. I shut my eyes. His voice was soothing oil. Jake, the guild as a whole doesn't know of this plant. Guild agents are freelancers, in the full sense of the word. They exercise their own initiative, and only report to Guild HQ when the job is done. Then, Carmody said, if we can find out who... Precisely. Starza's eyes were veiled. Incidentally, Don, you've been gone the last 4 days. Why? Carmody regarded him steadily. Recruiting. You knew that. Yet you brought back only a dozen terms. Carmody drew a slow, deep breath. Word's gotten around, Dave. The tribes have finally forgotten their petty wars and united against a common enemy, us. Any term that exhibits undesirable traits of individuality is now destroyed. I think a dozen was a good haul. You had the whole planet. Carmody's grin was diamond hard. You think maybe I spent a few hours under a guild mind control? Is that it? Starza said, On your way out, send Lost Tichnat in. Carmody flushed. Tichnat's the one and you know it. But if he's not, if you haven't run down the spy by tomorrow, you can accept my resignation. I saw what they left of Proicon. The door slammed behind him. Starza smiled at me. What do you think, Jake? Tichnat. The second I got out of there, the Thoughtcaster stopped. Doesn't mean a thing. They can beam through solid rock, 100-foot radius. No exploitation, I mused. Fanatics, Starza said. They'd impede the progress of man, sacrifice man's rightful place in the cosmos for the sake of crawling things. We'll fight them, Jake. Tichnat entered. He stood stiffly before Starza's desk, his antennae a cheerful emerald. Starza said carefully, What do you know about the guild? Impractical visionaries, Tichnat clicked. Lovers of stasis, well-meaning fools. They approached me yesterday. A vein throbbed purple in Starza's forehead, yet he kept his voice soft. And you didn't report it? And precipitate a crisis? Tichnat sounded amused. I was asked if my people were being persecuted. Had I answered in the affirmative, there might have been repercussions, perhaps a sequel to Proicon. Oh yes, we know of Proicon. Your foremen are sometimes indiscreet. Who was the agent? Starza breathed. Should I tell you and disrupt the status quo? You would destroy the agent. In retaliation, the guild might destroy this plant. Impossible. Guild agents have no such authority. A chance I cannot afford to take. Tichnat was adamant. Amalgamated, Starza prodded, offers a standing reward of 100,000 solar credits for apprehension of any guild agent. Your village could use those credits. You could equip an atomic lab. You could maintain your own research staff. Stop it, the antennae throbbed brilliantly. We are your friends, Tichnat. Symbiosis, I believe is the word, Tichnat clicked dryly. You need us. We need your science. We need your terrifying concept of individuality. We need to lose our old ways. The dance of harvest time, the Queen Mother. One by one, the rituals drop away. The old life, the good tribal life is dying. You sift out us misfits who chafe at tribal oneness. You offer us the planets. The antennae flashed an angry scarlet. You think to keep us chained a millennium. 100 years will suffice. We will leave you. We exiles you have made, we who would be destroyed if we dared return to the tribe, we shall rule this world. You aliens drive a hard bargain, but the dream is worth it. Prometheus in a bug's body, the shining strength and the dark terrible pride. "It is no dream," Starza said gently, "but perhaps you go about achieving it the wrong way. You still refuse to divulge the spy?"
"I am sorry. Good day," Starza brooded after him.
"He's a fool, but he's grasping mankind's concepts, Jake. I'd give my right eye for a good semanticist. Basic English does it. Self, want, mine, selfish ego words, the cornerstones of grasping humanity. Sure, we'll raise hell with their aesthetic sense, but in the end they'll thank us." I sat worrying about a secret fanatic somewhere in the plant who, in the holy interests of Mars for the Martians, Terminorb for the Terms, might soon plant an atomic warhead in our body shop. I finally said, "What are we going to do?"
"Do?" Starza chuckled. "Why, slacken line speeds, lower production standards, 50% at least. By tomorrow we'll be down to 40 jobs an hour. They want loose standards, we'll give it to them."
"But my cost."
"Obscenity, your cost. Look, Jake, no matter how you set an operation up, the Terms manage to work in some glittering little ritual. They have to create beauty. Their aesthetic sense must be fed. They can't adjust to quick change. Supposing you cut line speeds by 10%. They adjust, but it almost kills them. Then drop 30%. Their ritual loses timing, becomes discordant. What happens?" I blinked.
"They go mad."
"And our little guild saboteur will be guilty of a few term deaths. He'll have violated a basic guild tenet. He'll go home with his tail between his legs. Catch?" I caught. By mid-afternoon we had the conveyor speeds down 30%. The red line on my cost chart soared precariously. The entire production line slowed to a crawl. We waited. At 5 o'clock it happened. 3 terms in the body shop went mad. It started a chain reaction through the trim line. 6 more terms ran amok and had to be destroyed. Final assembly became a shambles. Starza called me on the Visicom, delighted. "Our guild agent played right into our hands, Jake. In forcing a production slump, he's harming the workers. His next move will probably be a bluff." I wasn't so sure. That evening, the executive dining room was choked with a tight, gnawing tension. Department heads spoke in hushed whispers, eyes darting. The man across the table could be a mindless controlled, a guild pawn. Smile at him politely and keep your mouth shut. I ordered Thar, a Terminorb arthropod that was usually more delicious than Venusian lobster, but tonight it tasted like broiled leather. It was like eating in a morgue. I saw Carmody at the next table. I nodded coolly to him, and he hitched his chair over and said, "By the way, Jake, I'm sorry about Harvey. He's going back to Earth next week." "Why?" "His stability index was too low," Carmody said smoothly. "Sure, we could have given him the works, but you didn't want a robot." I said deliberately, "I needed that boy, Don." Carmody got up, his smile infinitely contemptuous. "We don't all have your stability index, Jake." I stared after him, and the thought suddenly struck me that not once had I considered quitting, ever. Somehow the thought disturbed me. Abruptly, the public address speaker boomed. "Attention," Starza's voice crackled. "To the guild agent, wherever he may be, today you murdered 37 terms. Is this your altruism? Is this your vaunted justice?" He went on, his voice like organ musing, sweeping away all doubt, making you proud and glad to be a part of Amalgamated, part of production, when quite suddenly his voice choked off. Simultaneously another voice ripped through the hall, a cold, ironic whisper, lashing at the mind. "Altruism, yes, but not as you conceive it. Today you passed your own judgment. You have 24 hours to evacuate before this plant is destroyed. The verdict is final." The dining hall echoed with moans. Hands leaned to agonized temples, the thoughtcaster again on a wideband frequency. Through the pain I was conscious of Starza's voice. The guild was trying to bluff us. We wouldn't let them. I stumbled out of the hall, my teeth chattering, took the lift down to the first level and got outside to walk free in the park. Here was Eden. Giant conifers and ferns wove a cool green pattern of delight, and the laughter of the crystal fountains soothed. Terms had fashioned this garden, had created a poem in living green, a quiet fugue of oneness, each leaf blending exquisitely with the next, the unity, the perfect whole. For one weak moment I let the pattern seep insidiously into me, and then, ashamed, focused my eyes on that jarring splash of white in the centre of the garden. The 10-foot model of the amalgamated X3M, squat with power, lifting on her stern jets. A symbol of amalgamated strength, the indomitable spirit of mankind, beauty born of pure utility.
Oddly, a half-remembered poem of the ancients flitted through my brain. Dirty British coaster with her salt-caked smokestack, butting through the channel on the mad March days. That was man. On an infinity of planets he had met resistance, through force, through guile, even through beauty, and he had conquered. I drew a slow, deep breath and sat on one of the benches, staring up at the gigantic horseshoe of the factory, hearing the muted hum of the atomics. 24 hours. I tried to run through my axioms, and I was suddenly terrified. I couldn't remember them. That damned thoughtcaster. Twice in one day. Perhaps there was some gradual neural disintegration. My head hurt terribly. Tomorrow I'd go to Psych for a checkup. I thought about that marble villa in Venusport, and about my bank account. Not enough. Another year, just one more year, and I could retire at 34. I thought about the Venusian twilights and the turquoise mists off the deeps, and wondered dully if I'd ever see Venus or the Earth again. I saw Fern walking among the conifers, her face a pale mask of strain. "You heard it, Jake?" I nodded. We sat in the aquamarine twilight, and Fern was shivering, and I put my arm around her. "Looks like altruism is a relative thing," I said. "What do they want?" "Uncontaminated terms," she said bitterly. "No science, no stars, no wars, and no progress. A big beautiful planet mind, the term mind, forever static, forever dead." "It's a bluff," I said. "Our little fanatic stalling for time, hoping to stampede us while he finds another way." "For example?" "Why do you think we insist on basic English for all terms? Supposing a foreman should start jabbering Terminese during an operation. The terms would revert, we'd have a line shutdown. They can't adjust. Say," a random thought was nibbling at my brain, "where was Carmody this morning, just before I reeled in?" Her fine brows knitted. "Why, he went... Oh, Jake, surely you don't think..." "Went where?" "Down the hall, towards personnel." "Towards the conference hall, you mean? He never even examined Harvey." "It wasn't necessary," she said uncomfortably. "Don just wanted to verify his stability index." "Sure, so he stood outside the conference hall and put a whammy on me." Fern was smiling. I scowled. "It fits. It has to be him." "Or Tichnat," she said. "Or Starzа. Or me." I stared at her. "You'd do." My voice shook. "You were gone 3 months. They could have got to you." Her rich, warm laughter sifted through the twilight, and I wanted to hit her. "They did," she gurgled. "But I've decided to relent, Jake. I'll spare the plant on one condition, that you take me to the term festival tomorrow night." I grunted. "Carmody working overtime, I suppose?" "If the plant's still standing." I changed the subject. 2 hours later, Starza called a council of war. The conference room was crammed with quivering executives. Starza carefully let the tension build to a shrill crescendo before he said, "One of you gentlemen is a guild mindless controlled." Ragged silence. Starza's smile was very faint. "You gave us an ultimatum, but destroying this plant is an admission of failure you're not willing to make, yet. You'll try another tack. You're just beginning to discover that this environment we've created for the terms is superior to the primitive jungle. Tichnat!" Tichnat stepped forward. His antennae were a proud, brilliant gold. "Do you want to shut down?" Starza asked softly. "Are we fools?" Tichnat clicked. "To lose what we've gained? To return to our tribe? To be destroyed?" Starza's calm gaze caressed each face, probing. "You see? Stalemate. Whoever you are, you're bluffing. Tomorrow our conveyor speeds return to normal. You'll do nothing. You may try to agitate the terms, but they're satisfied." One of the superintendents cleared his throat. "Look," he said unsteadily. "Sometimes you can't afford to call a bluff." Starza said pleasantly. "Any resignations will be accepted right now. You can wait safely in the term village until next week's freighter arrives. No repercussions, I promise." The lie was blatant. Carmody stood by the door, his smile strained. It was all too obvious what would happen to any resignees. "None?" Starza's brows rose. "I'm proud of you. That's it, gentlemen." The next day was a frenetic nightmare. My cost dropped, but it didn't matter. That was one day when the best company man became a clock watcher. Line foremen, department heads cracked under the strain, and were summarily removed to Psych. Carmody and staff worked overtime. I toiled feverishly over operation schedules, the crazily fluctuating cost charts. My headache was gone, but I still couldn't remember my axioms. I felt guilty over not going to Psych, but there just wasn't the time. Hell, I'd never needed indoctrination. I was an amalgamated man through and through. Finally, I grabbed an engineering manual, leafed angrily through it, and sat there, empty and shaking. I'd gone insane. The words were gibberish. Oh, I could read them all right, but they didn't make sense. What a filthy trick. Semantic block, Starza would call it. I kept staring at the meaningless words, conscious of a tearing sense of loss, and I wanted to cry. 6 o'clock was 0 hour. 6 o'clock came, and the factory held its collective breath while nothing happened. At 6:30, Starza made a long speech over the public address, about the selfless spirit of man helping the terms reach the stars, about how we would never admit defeat, and about how, after tonight, the term festival would be discontinued. The terms had adopted mankind's culture. They had no further need of their effete native customs. At 7, Fern and I were walking past administration toward the lighted square-mile enclosure of the term village. Fern had never seen a festival. A throwback, I said, to their old tribal days. Their harvest, when they pay tribute to the Queen Mother and pray for good crops and work well done. It's their yearly substitute for Stammverstand. Back in the native villages, whenever a term's in trouble, he goes to the council hut and the others join him in a silent group telepathy. But we've just about weaned them, Angel. They'll be individuals soon. We walked down the deserted row of term huts, past the council hall, to the great stone amphitheatre, and sat with the other execs. Fern was very gay and cheerful, but I kept thinking about my axioms, trying to bring them back to life. I felt dead, all dead inside. Starza came up, frowning, and I congratulated him. It's too pat, Jake. It worries me. Where's Carmody?
Setting up those semantic reaction tests you gave him, Fern said.
But I never gave him... Abruptly the lights snuffed out. At one end of the arena loomed a 12-foot statue of a bloated term, limned in a soft pale glow. The Queen Mother. The hush, then the radiance. Slowly the terms filed into the arena, rank upon rank of living flame. First the fighters, their antennae shining crimson and splendid against the tall night. Then the twin glows of blue that denoted the spinners, the weavers. The golden blaze of the harvesters. The lambent colours crept through the air like a mood, like a dream, and deepened into a shimmering cataract of rainbow fire, a paean of light and glory that whirled and spun in a joyous rhythm as old as the race itself. Then, chaos. A blinding flare cascaded from the 6-foot antennae of the statue. The radiance grew, brighter than an atomic flare, more terrible than the sun. The terms stood frozen. Beside me, Starza swore. This wasn't in the script. That colossal voice, ear-snapping clicks and liquid vowels, terminese, the forbidden tongue. The voice blared. I caught most of it. Children, you have sinned. You are defiled with the taint of alien monsters. You have failed the Queen Mother. Return, my children. Return to your tribes. Return to the tabernacle of unity, the one in all, the Queen Mother. For in death there is life, and there is joy in immolation. Return! Lastly, the climax. That last shattering hunk of propaganda that would have been so tritely amusing if it hadn't been so terrifying. You have nothing to lose but your chains. The giant antennae faded into a liquid silver. The silver of hope, of forgiveness. For a moment I was blind. I felt Fern trembling against me. The execs were chattering like frightened sheep. Then I could see. I saw Starza. He was moving down the aisle, cursing in a tight, dull monotone. I followed him down into the arena. The terms stood shriveled, mute. Starza was fumbling at the base of the statue, and he said in a thick, horrible voice, Look! The loudspeaker, the coiled wiring. The terms stirred. Starza leaped to the lap of the statue. He bawled, Listen! This is sacrilege! You have been victims of a hoax! Not listening, they filed in silent groups out of the arena. Their antennae were the colour of ashes. Starza jumped down. He pounded after them. He was shouting at Lost Tichnat. I know, Tichnat droned. He kept walking. You are right. It does not matter that you are right. The Queen Mother called. Listen, Starza mouthed. It was a fraud, a trick. You can't. We must. Tichnat paused. For a long moment the great faceted eyes stared somberly. It was a splendid dream, the thing you offered us. But this is the final reality. And yours is but a dream. He tramped stolidly on after the others. The council hall door closed. Starza clawed at the door. It opened. He was too late. They sat silently around the great table, the faceted eyes dead, the antennae coruscating indigo, now green, now rose. Communion. The meshing of minds. Starza shouted at them. Stillness. Starza looked blindly at me. He was shaking. Carmody, he said. Carmody knows the term mind. He can do something. Come on, he said. We found Carmody in his quarters, methodically packing. His eyebrows rose as we burst in. Did you gentlemen ever try knocking? Starza just looked at him. Carmody drew a long breath. You'll find my resignation on your desk, Dave. Ah? Starza's voice was very soft. It's only a question of time, Carmody said. Call it the rat deserting the ship if you like, but I'm through. Starza was smiling, a fat man's smile. So you really think you can pull it off? He whispered. Carmody shrugged, and Starza calmly took out a sonic pistol and shot him in the belly. A sonic blast hemorrhages. It rends the capillaries, ploughs the flesh into a flaccid collection of shattered nerve fibres and ruined arteries. It's a rotten way to die. Starza watched Carmody thrash himself to death on the floor. I turned away. For the record, Jake, he made a full confession. We both heard him. Just for the record, I said. It had to be him, Starza said. That Thoughtcaster blast yesterday morning made reference to your study on the term. Only Harvey and Carmody knew about that. It couldn't have been Harvey. He cut his throat this morning. I've decided, Starza said. This is a Type L planet after all. The natives are chronically unstable. Hostile, in fact. Pursuant to Solar Regulation 3, we have the right to enforce martial law. It should be 6 months before an investigation. Meanwhile, we'll get production, I said. We'll get production. He wiped his forehead, relaxed. I'll send in a full report tonight. Better turn in, Jake, he said kindly. I'll need you in the morning. I turned in. You lie awake, staring into the blackness. It gnaws. My head throbbed. I should have felt a triumphant relief, but I could not remember my axioms, and I felt a sick, dull hate for the thing the guild spy Carmody had done to me. What happens when you strip a man of everything he believes in? He remembers other things. Those memories came trooping back like ghosts, and I fought them, sweating, but they came. Once upon a time there was a starry-eyed young engineer who started out to set the galaxy on fire. But he got squeamish somewhere along the way, so Carmody operated on him. Carmody did things to his brain, made a good production man out of him. I remembered now. That time I had argued with Starza about standards 9 years ago, and I had resigned, and Starza sent me to Psych. Good old Carmody. There would never be a white marble villa on Venus. It was a harmless dream, a substitute for what I had lost. But it didn't matter. Those superimposed patterns had been removed. That Thoughtcaster had crippled my thinking. But by heaven, I was still an amalgamated man. They couldn't take that away. But Starza had been wrong about Carmody. Nothing definite. But when you dedicate your life into extrapolating curves, frozen chunks of time and motion, into the thunder of jets lifting amalgamated ships from Terminorb, your mind becomes a very efficient analog computer, if you know how to use. I used it now. I fed little things, facts, variables into that computer, and it told me 3 times. Probability 60% at least. I got up, dressed stiffly. I was trembling. I could still serve after all. I took the lift up to administration and walked down that long grey corridor on leaden feet towards the illuminated rectangle of Starza's office. I opened the door. "Hello, darling," Fern said. She was unhurriedly burning Starza's report. Starza sat mutely in his chair, head tilted back at an impossible angle, staring at nothing. It had to be you. I had never felt so tired. You would have destroyed the plant, wouldn't you? Only I showed you another way. Make the terms revert. And you had that hypo already when I reeled into Psych. I moved towards her carefully. You're so damned altruistic. A guild mindless controlled, I said. Fern's smile was compassionate. She methodically ground the ashes to powder, lifted that calm green gaze. Stupid words to frighten children, Jake. Yes, they kidnapped me. I never reached Earth 3 months ago. I was indoctrinated. Oh, they didn't have far to go. Each race to its own fulfillment. Her eyes were shining. Look out the window. Numbly I moved past her. I stared. In the distant blackness a column of living flame flickered up the slope of Cobalt Mountain. Ice green, ruby, silver and blue. The terms were leaving. They're not ready for individuality yet, Fern breathed. In 1,000,000 years, perhaps.
Not now. They're going home. To die? The race will live. Individuality isn't the penultimate, darling. You'll find out. I moved towards her. You've got a very tough mind, Jake. You'll make a wonderful guild agent. I got both hands on her throat. Fern moved. Her right arm was a snake striking, and a steel strength lifted me, turning against 1.5 gravities, and the floor wavered up to hit me in the face. Something broke. I tasted blood. Through the agony I moved. I crawled towards her. They gave me 6 weeks of hand combat under 2 gravs, she said. Soon you'll be one of us, Jake. One of the guild. I stared up at her in a dull horror. I kept crawling. We'll heal you, Fern said. We'll give you back the dream. We may even work together. Maybe I'll fall in love with you again. Who knows? Her eyes were brimming. She took out a sonic pistol. It's all right, darling. I'll adjust it for knockout. In 3 hours we'll be on a guild flyer. Please, darling, she said, and I kept crawling. And Fern's smile was a benediction as she pulled the trigger.
Remember to hit the like button and even the hype button if you're listening on YouTube within 7 days of release. Thanks. Teething Ring by James Causey. Narrated by William Skye. Anyone can make an error, but the higher the society, the more disastrous the mistake. Half an hour before, while she had been engrossed in the current soap opera and Harry Jr. was screaming in his crib, Melinda would naturally have slammed the front door in the little man's face. However, when the bell rang, she was wearing her new Chinese red housecoat, had just lustered her nails to a blinding scarlet, and Harry Jr. was sleeping like an angel. Yawning, Melinda answered the door and the little man said, beaming, "Excellent day. I have Gigors for information." Melinda did not quite recoil. He was perhaps 5 feet tall with a gleaming hairless scalp and a young old face. He wore a plain grey tunic and a peddler's tray hung from his thin shoulders. "Don't want any," Melinda stated flatly. "Please." He had great beseeching amber eyes. "They all say that. I haven't much time. I must be back at the university by noon." "You working your way through college?" He brightened. "Yes, I suppose you could call it that. Alien anthropology major." Melinda softened. The initiations those frats pulled nowadays. Shaving the poor guy's head, eating goldfish. It was criminal. "Well," she asked grudgingly, "what's in the tray?" "Flanglers," said the little man eagerly. "Oscilloscopes, portable force field generators, a neural distorter." Melinda's face was blank. The little man frowned. "You use them, of course. This is a Class 4 culture." Melinda essayed a weak shrug, and the little man sighed with relief. His eyes fled past her to the blank screen of the TV set. "Ah, a monitor," he smiled. "For a moment I was afraid. May I come in?" Melinda shrugged, opened the door. This might be interesting, like a vacuum cleaner salesman who had cleaned her drapes last week for free. And Kitty Kyle Battle's life wouldn't be on for almost an hour. "My name is Porteous," said the little man with an eager smile. "I'm doing a thematic on Class 4 cultures." He whipped out a stylus, began jotting down notes. The TV set fascinated him. "It's turned off right now," Melinda said. Porteous's eyes widened impossibly. "You mean," he whispered in horror, "that you're exercising Class 5 privileges? This is terribly confusing. I get doors slammed in my face when Class 4s are supposed to have a splendid gregarian quotient. You do have atomic power, don't you?" "Oh, sure," said Melinda uncomfortably. This wasn't going to be much fun. "Space travel?" The little face was intent, sharp. "Well," Melinda yawned, looking at the blank screen. "They've got Space Patrol, Space Cadet, Tales of Tomorrow." "Excellent. Rocket ships or force fields?" Melinda blinked. "Does your husband own one?" Melinda shook her blonde head helplessly. "What are your economic circumstances?" Melinda took a deep, rasping breath, said, "Listen, mister, is this a demonstration or a quiz program?" "Oh, my excuse. Demonstration, certainly. You will not mind the questions?" "Questions?" There was an ominous glint in Melinda's blue eyes. "Your delightful primitive customs, art forms, personal habits." "Look," Melinda said, crimsoning. "This is a respectable neighbourhood, and I'm not answering any Kinsey report. Understand?" The little man nodded, scribbling. "Personal habits are taboo. I so regret. The demonstration." He waved grandly at the tray. "Anti-grav sandals? A portable solar converter? Apologizing for this miserable selection, but on Capella they told me—" He followed Melinda's entranced gaze, selected a tiny green vial. "This is merely a regenerative solution. You appear to have no cuts or bruises." "Oh," said Melinda nastily. "Cures warts, cancer, grows hair, I suppose." Porteous brightened. "Of course. I see you can scan. Amazing." He scribbled further with his stylus, glanced up, blinked at the obvious scorn on Melinda's face. "Here, try it." "You try it." Now watch him squirm. Porteous hesitated. "Would you like me to grow an extra finger, hair? Grow some hair." Melinda tried not to smile. The little man unstopped the vial, poured a shimmering green drop on his wrist, frowning. "Must concentrate," he said. "Thorium base, suspended solution. Really jolts the endocrines, complete control, see?" Melinda's jaw dropped. She stared at the tiny tuft of hair which had sprouted on that bare wrist. She was thinking abruptly, unhappily, about that chignon she had bought yesterday. They had let her buy that for $8, when with this stuff she could have a natural one. "How much?" she inquired cautiously. "A half-hour of your time only," said Porteous. Melinda grasped the vial firmly, settled down on the sofa with one leg tucked carefully under her. "Okay, shoot, but nothing personal." Porteous was delighted. He asked a multitude of questions, most of them pointless, some naive, and Melinda dug into her infinitesimal fund of knowledge and gave. The little man scribbled furiously, clucking like a gravid hen. "You mean," he asked in amazement, "that you live in these primitive huts of your own volition?" "It's a GI housing project," Melinda said, ashamed. "Astonishing." He wrote, "Feudal anachronisms and atomic power side by side. Class 4s periodically rough it in back-to-nature movements." Harry Jr. chose that moment to begin screaming for his lunch. Porteous sat trembling. "Is that a security alarm?" "My son," said Melinda despondently, and went into the nursery. Porteous followed and watched the ululating child with some trepidation. "Newborn?" 18 months, said Melinda stiffly, changing diapers. "He's cutting teeth." Porteous shuddered. "What a pity. Obviously atavistic. Wouldn't the creche accept him? You shouldn't have to keep him here." "I keep after Harry to get a maid, but he says we can't afford one." "Manifestly insecure," muttered the little man, studying Harry Jr. "Definite paranoid tendencies." "He was 2 weeks premature," volunteered Melinda. "He's real sensitive." "I know just the thing," Porteous said happily. "Here." He dipped into the glittering litter on the tray and handed Harry Jr. a translucent prism. "A neural distorter. We use it to train regressives on Regal 2. It might be of assistance." Melinda eyed the thing doubtfully. Harry Jr. was peering into the shifting crystal depths with a somewhat strained expression. "Speeds up the neural flow," explained the little man proudly. "Helps tap the unused 80%. The pre-symptomatic memory is unaffected due to automatic cerebral lapse in case of overload. I'm afraid it won't do much more than cube his present IQ, and an intelligent idiot is still an idiot, but—" "How dare you?" Melinda's eyes flashed. "My son is not an idiot. You get out of here this minute and take your things with you." As she reached for the prism, Harry Jr. squalled. Melinda relented.
Here, she said angrily, fumbling with her purse. How much are they? Medium of exchange? Porteous rubbed his bald skull. Oh, I really shouldn't, but it will make such a wonderful addendum to the chapter on malignant primitives. What is your smallest denomination? Is $1 okay? Melinda was hopeful. Porteous was pleased with the picture of George Washington. He turned the bill over and over in his fingers, at last bowed low and formally, apologized for any taboo violations, and left via the front door. Crazy fraternities, muttered Melinda, turning on the TV set. Kitty Kyle was dull that morning. At length Melinda used some of the liquid in the green vial on her eyelashes, was quite pleased at the results, and hid the rest in the medicine cabinet. Harry Jr. was a model of docility the rest of that day. While Melinda watched TV and munched chocolates, did and redid her hair, Harry Jr. played quietly with the crystal prism. Toward late afternoon he crawled over to the bookcase, wrestled down the encyclopedia and pored through it, gurgling with delight. He definitely, Melinda decided, would make a fine lawyer some day, not a useless putterer like Big Harry, who worked all hours overtime in that damned lab. She scowled as Harry Jr., bored with the encyclopedia, began reaching for one of Big Harry's tomes on nuclear physics. One putterer in the family was enough. But when she tried to take the book away from him, Harry Jr. howled so violently that she let well enough alone. At 6:30, Big Harry called from the lab with the usual despondent message that he would not be home for supper. Melinda said a few resigned things about cheerless dinners eaten alone, hinted darkly what lonesome wives sometimes did for company, and Harry said he was very sorry, but this might be it, and Melinda hung up on him in a temper. Precisely 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Melinda opened the front door and gaped. This little man could have been Porteous's double, except for the black metallic tunic, the glacial grey eyes. "Mrs. Melinda Adams?" Even the voice was frigid. "Yes, why?" "Major Nord, Galactic Security." The little man bowed. "You were visited early this morning by one Porteous." He spoke the name with a certain disgust. "He left a neural distorter here, correct?" Melinda's nod was tremulous. Major Nord came quietly into the living room, shut the door behind him. "My apologies, madam, for the intrusion. Porteous mistook your world for a Class 4 culture instead of a Class 7. Here." He handed her the crumpled dollar bill. "You may check the serial number. The distorter, please." Melinda shrunk limply onto the sofa. "I don't understand," she said painfully. "Was he a thief?" "He was careless about his spatial coordinates." Major Nord's teeth showed in the faintest of smiles. "He has been corrected. Where is it?" "Now look," said Melinda with some asperity. "That thing's kept Harry Jr. quiet all day. I bought it in good faith, and it's not my fault. Say, have you got a warrant?" "Madam," said the Major with dignity, "I dislike violating local taboos, but must I explain the impact of a neural distorter on a backwater culture? What if your Neanderthal had been given atomic blasters? Where would you have been today? Swinging through trees, no doubt. What if your Hitler had force fields?" He exhaled. "Where is your son?" In the nursery, Harry Jr. was contentedly playing with his blocks. The prism lay glinting in the corner. Major Nord picked it up carefully, scrutinized Harry Jr. His voice was very soft. "You said he was playing with it?" Some vestigial maternal instinct prompted Melinda to shake her head vigorously. The little man stared hard at Harry Jr., who began whimpering. Trembling, Melinda scooped up Harry Jr. "Is that all you have to do? Run around frightening women and children? Take your old distorter and get out. Leave decent people alone." Major Nord frowned. If only he could be sure. He peered stonily at Harry Jr., murmured, "Definite egomania. It doesn't seem to have affected him. Strange."
Do you want me to scream? Melinda demanded. Major Nord sighed. He bowed to Melinda, went out, closed the door, touched a tiny stud on his tunic, and vanished. The manners of some people, Melinda said to Harry Jr. She was relieved that the Major had not asked for the green vial. Harry Jr. also looked relieved, although for quite a different reason. Big Harry arrived home a little after 11. There were small worry creases about his mouth and forehead, and the leaden cast of defeat in his eyes. He went into the bedroom, and Melinda sleepily told him about the little man working his way through college by peddling silly goods, and about that rude cop named Nord, and Harry said that was simply astonishing, and Melinda said, Harry, you had a drink? I had 2 drinks, Harry told her owlishly. You married a failure, dear. Part of the experimental model vaporized. Whoosh, just like that. On paper it looked so good. Melinda had heard it all before. She asked him to see if Harry Jr. was covered, and Big Harry went unsteadily into the nursery, sat down by his son's crib. Poor little guy, he mused. Your old man's a bum, a useless tinker. He thought he could send man to the stars on a string of helium nuclei. Oh, he was smart. Thought of everything. Auxiliary jets to kick off the negative charge, bigger mercury vapor banks, a fine straight thrust of positive alpha particles. He hiccuped, put his face in his hands. Didn't you ever stop to think that a few air molecules could defocus the stream? Try a vacuum, stupid. Big Harry stood up. Did you say something, son? Garthel? Said Harry Jr. Big Harry reeled into the living room like a somnambulist. He got pencil and paper, began jotting frantic formulae. Presently he called a cab and raced back to the laboratory. Melinda was dreaming about little bald men with diamond-studded trays. They were chasing her. They kept pelting her with rubies and emeralds. All they wanted was to ask questions, but she kept running, Harry Jr. clasped tightly in her arms. Now they were ringing alarm bells. The bells kept ringing, and she groaned, sat up in bed, and seized the telephone. Darling, Big Harry's voice shook. I've got it! More auxiliary shielding plus a vacuum. We'll be rich! That's just fine, said Melinda crossly. You woke the baby. Harry Jr. was sobbing bitterly into his pillow. He was sick with disappointment. Even the most favourable extrapolation showed it would take him 19 years to become master of the world. An eternity. 19 years. Thanks for listening. You can find more collections by the best sci-fi authors of the 40s, 50s and 60s in the playlist section of the channel, along with many other compilations and standalone stories. For full novels, go over to my Payhip page where you can get them as audiobooks, all ad-free and narrated by me. Link to that in the description. See you in the next one.